This video will touch upon racism, incest, grooming, pedophilia, sexual harassment, depictions of child porn, depictions of suicide, visual portrayals of rape, and trivialization/romanticization of the previous two topics. If any of these topics are upsetting to you, you may want to click away. Also, I want to just quickly apologize. I have several dogs in my room right now, so if the microphone somehow picks up on them scratching or licking or doing, dog things, I am sorry about that. But it shouldn't pick it up because it barely even picks up my own voice, so yeah. Recently, a content creator known as Streamline Workshop posted a video about the user I'll be talking about today. Some of my fans asked me to look into it as well, so of course I did. And I realized that Streamline's video left out some stuff, and despite leaving stuff out, it's honestly a lot longer than it needs to be. So, in today's video, I'll be talking about BlogTheGreatRouge, and how she supports pedophilic media, sexual assault in media, trivialization of suicide, and just overall being horrendous with the platform that she has. BlogTheGreatRouge, or Rouge for short, is a 28-year-old woman and has been on Tumblr since 2015. So she's been on the internet since 22 to 23. So keep that in mind, that through everything I'll be talking about and discussing today, she's been a legal adult the entire time. She's known for making Undertale AU comics, specifically Paper Jam X Fresh, PJ's Daycare, Jammy's Love, VampireVerse, and the Nerd and Jock AU, which, don't worry, we'll be talking about all of these. However, she's also interacted with the Batman community, creating Bendy and Boris Quest for the Ink Machine, which apparently also includes Cuphead and his brother for whatever reason. Now, today we'll just be talking about their Undertale work, however, I'll look into the Quest for the Ink Machine and see if it's worth talking about in the future. But, in the meantime, let's just look into PJ's Daycare. Daycare is about Paper Jam called Mr. PJ having a daycare where almost all the other Sans AUs are children, mainly 4 to 8, but there are kids like Palette, Goth, and Cray who are about 12. There are a few characters like Fika, Bluescreen, and Gradient who are all adults. They all take care of the kids at the daycare, and hijinks ensue or something like that. Speaking of Bluescreen and Gradient, let's get into my first point, the somewhat incestual implications of them being shipped together. Now, if you're like me last week, you probably wouldn't know who these characters are. Bluescreen is the child of Error and Swap Stance, or Blueberry, made by Seven Good Angel and Askin Fresh. Keep that in mind. Error is one of his dads. He's also the brother of Paper Jam, whose parents are normally Error and Ink. Then there's Gradient, the child of Error and Ink, made by Ass Combo Club, who, once again, is a child of Error. Now, I know in this AU, Error is a child, and thus has no kids, but the fact that Rouge decides to pair Gradient and Bluescreen in a romantic relationship is just odd. I know the parents of these three in this AU are based on the creators, which is why PJ and Bluescreen are siblings, because they're both made by Seven Good Angel, but it's still weird that they're romantically involved. It's not straight up incest, but it's still weird and can definitely be seen that way. Also, Rouge typically ships the same characters across AU, such as always shipping Paper Fresh or always shipping Poth, so it's not too outlandish to assume she also ships these two in their canon, making it straight up incest. Now, this section is short, but it's still messed up. When PJ is being arrested for being a pedo, which, yes, we'll touch upon in a moment, and Asker makes a joke about PJ only being arrested because his skin tone, or bone tone, because his bone tone is black, and instead of Rouge simply ignoring it, or saying, let's not make racist jokes based around the discrimination that black people face regarding being arrested and even murdered, she instead decides to illustrate a fun little comic showing this.
So, do you know why you're being pulled over? Yeah, 'cause I'm black. That's PJ!
Back in 2016 when this happened, people of color were still going through this kind of stuff. Keep in mind, Rouge was around 23 when this happened. Also, I'll be the first to say it, considering the current Black Lives Matter movement, this comic aged like unrefrigerated milk sat out in the sun for the past 5 years. Alright, what y'all have been waiting for, Rouge and her depictions of pedophilia. Now, let's first touch upon Mr. PJ and Fresh. Fresh has a crush on Mr. PJ, which, in all honesty, isn't that bad. However, it quickly gets worse, as PJ says he will marry Fresh, a 4 to 6-year-old, once he's of age. According to NSPCC, grooming is when someone builds up an emotional relationship with a minor so that they can manipulate, exploit, and abuse the minor in question. While PJ did not initiate the weirdness, he did continue it, and imply he will marry Fresh when he's of age, which, by definition, is grooming, due to PJ using the emotional bond with Fresh to manipulate him into marrying him when he is of age. Also, this panel, he calls a grown-up version of the child he babysits hot, which is interesting, to say the least. Arguably the most harmful part of this AU is the betrayal of Gino's attempted suicide, who is likely on the older end of the spectrum of only around 6 to 8. In short, Gino becomes depressed and suicidal and attempts to kill himself after believing his brother has passed away. During this, Pallet and Goth find him, and can you guess who is being comforted? Goth, who wasn't even near the edge? While yes, if someone is suicidal, everyone involved will be hurt and need comforting to some degree. However, the child who is literally inching towards the edge of the cliff is in need of being helped, not the person who is just standing there panicking. Eventually, PJ appears, and instead of helping him, scolds him for being suicidal. To anyone who has not dealt with these feelings in their life, first, I hope that continues, and second, this is the absolute worst thing you could say to anyone who is suicidal other than straight up telling them to jump. Suicidal people aren't trying to be mature or impressive or I don't know. They're in pain. They're in so much pain that they just want to die. And Rouge decides to try and say otherwise with this honestly atrocious portrayal of suicidal people. Also, I'm just gonna go out on a limb here, but I'm guessing no one who reads PJ's Daycare is going into child care work, but I'm still gonna say this. If you know someone who is suicidal or has tried to commit suicide, don't fucking keep that to yourself or wait to tell someone. This goes for anyone of any age. If someone you know is hurting and wants to take their own life, please tell someone. It can save that person's life. It can be scary, of course, but the possibility of them being upset with you for some reason is nowhere near as bad as the person actually dying. Now, toning it back down a bit, after Gino's attempted suicide, Pallet gets all moody about the fact that he has a crush on Goth, so he stays behind and, well, let me just show you.
Hop on the feels train, Goth. Pallet, XD. Pallet, he was gonna jump. I was so scared.
It's okay. Everything is fine now.
Oh, Pallet.
You really are a delicate creature, Gothy.
Kiss him, Pallet. Kiss him. You're right, Pallet. I should be happy. Come on, let's follow Mr. PJ.
Hey, sure thing, buddy old pal. Smooth, Pallet. Real smooth.
Dude, Pallet, why didn't you go for it?
Whatever. This whole thing is stupid anyway. We're best friends, and we always will be. Pallet, just go follow them, or you'll get left behind.
You coming?
Go on without me. I'll catch up in a bit. This whole adventure has made me thirsty. Better get me a refreshing drink. Huh? She seems lost. Pallet, go talk to your new buddy. She's looking to see if she can apply to PJ's Daycare. Really? That's awesome. Wait a minute. She's kinda pretty. If we work together, I'm sure we'll hook up and then I'll forget about this silly thought of mine.
This is hopeless. What the? Wow!
Hey there, good looking.
Well, help her out, Pallet. Can I help you?
The better question is, can I help you? I heard you're looking for PJ's Daycare. Lucky for you, this handsome young fellow actually works there.
OMG, really? Help me out, please.
Well said, Pallet. Now show her to the Daycare.
Let's go then. Right this way. Anyway, does the pretty lady have a name?
It's Fika. And you are?
Pallet. Pallet Roller. Fika. What do you think of Pallet?
I love you anyway. He's a nice kid.
Fika. Pallet is not a kid.
Wait, he's not? How old are you, Pallet?
12.
He is a kid. You almost made me think I was disrespecting a very short man.
Lol. What? Pallet is flirting with an adult when he's 12? It doesn't matter. We're gonna know about each other more. A beautiful romance is gonna blossom between us. We'll get married, and my best friend will be my best man.
Yo, Pallet, not to ruin things, but when you're married, you're not gonna have time for Goth. You're only gonna have time for your family and other stuff, dude.
No way! I'll never forget my pal. He can visit us whenever he wants. Plus, he loves kids, so I'm sure he'll love our kids.
While it's good Rouge doesn't have Fika encourage this like Mr. PJ, it's still weird that she defaults to children lusting after adults, which, don't worry, we'll see more of later. Until then, final issue with this AU. I'll be the first to say it. Rouge isn't great with portraying expressions. I mean, she drew the child about to leap off a cliff with intense blush. However, I've noticed Rouge has two types of blush, the more generic, easy-to-draw one that's used in literally every situation ever, and a more intense and slightly more detailed one, saved for more romantic and intense situations, mainly expressed by the use of color lines and just extra color in general. Now, this scene where Error asks to go see his brother in ink, Mr. PJ uses the more intense romantic specific blush, which I'm not sure how I feel about an adult man blushing at a 4-ish-year-old child who is canonically his father, but hey, that's just me. Now we move on to VampireVerse. VampireVerse is almost entirely based on Error the Vampire, renamed to Fallacy, his husband, Ink the French Painter, renamed to Unker, their son, Paperjam, renamed to Jasper, and their butler, Fresh, renamed to Suave. Now, all of Jasper's character in this AU is just being a rapist, and Rouge mainly portrays this as cute uwu art. Hell, she even made a shitpost about it. While this is a disgusting portrayal of what Rouge wants to be a cute little ship, there's honestly not much that I can say other than it's rape, and rape isn't a cute XD plot point. Anyways, let's continue to the next AU. Jammy's love is almost the original AU for Rouge's Paper Fresh ship. Paperjam is the son of Ink, Error is Ink's husband, Fresh is Error's brother, and Paperjam's boyfriend, except that Paperjam is a child. Anyways, let's go over everything from the smallest issue to the biggest issue, in my opinion. Now, let's go over, once again, more incest. Except this time, instead of implied incest, it's straight up incest. Now, Ink is Jammy's dad. Error is married to Ink, causing him to be Jammy's other dad, just not by blood. Fresh is Error's biological brother, so he's Jammy's uncle, once again, just not by blood. Now, before any nasty or just uneducated people try and say this isn't incest, please shut up. Family isn't determined by blood, it's determined by love. And I mean familial love, not romantic love. I think Fresh got that a little bit mixed up. But since Error is married to Ink, he is Jammy's dad, and this makes the Fresh and Jammy relationship incestual in nature. Now, in this AU, Error often sexually harasses Ink. He's shown to be very manipulative, and while it's weird as hell and I don't like saying it out loud, it's often a plot point that Error licks Ink's neck, so he'll just shut down and let Error have his way with him. I shouldn't have to say this, but even if you're in a relationship with someone, it doesn't mean that no suddenly means yes. That's such a gross narrative that Rouge tries to push, but it doesn't end there. Jammy, yes, the child, is straight up sexually assaulting Fresh at times. Whether doing it by putting Fresh on top of him and forcing him to do sexual acts with him, or straight up just raping him in his sleep, Rouge likes to write Jammy as a rapist and thinks it's okay and cute or something. Just because you have feelings for someone doesn't mean that they can sexually assault you, which Rouge tries to say otherwise in her writing quite a lot, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. Here we are, the straight up pedophilia. Now, considering Rouge draws Jammy and Fresh having sex on several occasions, there's no question about the relationship being sexual in nature. However, Rouge never outright states Jammy's age, so we'll have to deduce it with the other information that she has given to us. First of all, this image. It shows the size difference between PJ and Jammy's heads, or skulls. Jammy's skull looks a lot more like a child's skull, with bigger eyes, no developed freckles, and overall just being smaller. Let's compare a baby's head to an adult's head. Babies and children in general tend to have their facial features lower on their head, especially their eyes. It's the most noticeable lowered feature. Next, since their heads are smaller, babies' eyes appear very big compared to the rest of their head. Finally, the freckles. Newborns tend to have little to no facial markings, but with time, develop them. It's like how animals tend to not develop as vibrant of colors for a few weeks. Another thing is PJ's Daycare. Let's look at how the young babies are drawn. We'll use Error specifically since he has the same bone color. Error also has a very small head and massive eyes, but he is young, like 5 years old, so it is more exaggerated. However, if we look at Goth, a 12-year-old, His features aren't even as childlike as Jammy's. Hell, I mistook him as a teen for most of the story. Considering Rouge knows how to depict age differences with anatomy, it's clear that Jammy is older than baby Error, who's around 5, and younger than Goth, who's like 12 to 13. Second, the name Jammy. It's very clearly a nickname for a young child. It's like how someone named Tom might be called Tommy when they're younger, or someone named Bob might be called Bobby when they're younger. Third, Jammy's speech. He refers to Ink as mommy, a very childlike thing to do, especially considering Ink is male, and that when he talks about sex, he calls it looties and things lovers do. He also calls Fresh Mr. Fresh, like a child would call pretty much every adult in their life, minus their parents. Finally, Error's comment on Jammy not having hit puberty yet. This kinda outright says that Jammy is not only a child, but one that's pre-puberty. Puberty for boys can start between 8 to 14, but often starts at 12, so we'll just assume that Jammy is 12, despite the fact he looks a lot younger than 12-year-old Goth, but hey, benefit of the doubt for Rouge. Now, proof Mr. Fresh is an adult is that an asker asked if Fresh is 5 to 6 years older than Jammy. Jammy proceeds to say he's way older than that. Now, even if I give the benefit of the doubt and say that Fresh is only 7 years older, that'd still make him 19, and it's still pedophilia. However, it's more likely that it's around a decade and a half, so Jammy is about 12, and Fresh is about 27, which, yikes. Little Jammy Hood builds off of the last AU, with the same ages, blood relations, and sometimes lack thereof. However, it is Little Riding Hood themed, where Fresh is the big bad wolf, Jammy is the Little Red Riding Hood, Error is the hunter, and Ink's just there. Alright, in short, same issues as last time. Incest, pedophilia, etc, etc. However, this time it's just Fresh having cat ears and a tail. It's disgusting, however, it is the same issues as last time, and I really don't want to have to repeat myself, so let's just continue. Instead of Jammy assaulting Fresh, it's the other way around. I'm just gonna show these images on screen and let you form your own opinions on it. Once again, while it's terrible, there's not much that I can say about it. It's rape, that's it. So, let's move on to the worst AU so far. Nerd and Jock is your generic school AU. Everyone is either a nerd, a jock, or a teacher. This is honestly one of the absolute worst AUs Rouge has ever made, so let's just get into all the issues with it. As usual, PJ and Fresh are in a relationship, and as usual, there's abuse involved. This entire relationship is based on abuse, to be exact. Sadly, I only have 2 images due to Rouge doing a massive purge of content, but both are of PJ abusing Fresh. Once again, just because you have feelings for someone doesn't mean they can abuse you. Despite this being disgusting, once again, I don't have much that I can say about it, so we have to just continue. Palette and Goth are 2 students. Palette is a jock, specifically a cheerleader, and Goth is a nerd, specifically a librarian. Anyways, let's just look at the issues because you already know that there's several. Goth and Palette both have feelings for each other, however, Palette wants to just remain friends. Goth, however, wants to take things further, so Rouge decides to draw Goth raping Palette. The next day after, Palette is justifiably mentally broken and furious at Goth, which leads into the next point of mine. Because of Palette being furious at Goth for, raping him, Goth decides he's feeling guilty, so he stabs himself in the chest, or where chest would be, in an attempt to kill himself. Palette ends up finding him and calls 911 when Goth says, "I thought you wanted this." This is a clear guilt trip on Goth's part, and it leads to the next major issue. Rouge, keep in mind, is an adult woman, decides to write the rape victim thanking their rapist for sexually assaulting them, and saying he loves Goth and he is appreciative of being raped. I'm surprised that I, someone who's only turning 15 by the end of the month, has to be telling a nearly 30-year-old woman that rape victims aren't going to be thanking their rapists. She's trying to blur the lines between consensual and non-consensual sex, which is what happened with Palette and Goth. But anyways, that's not the end of this issue. Turns out this was all a manipulation tactic on Goth's part, as he says he wants to live again. Rouge then proceeds to canonically make a rape victim fall in love with their rapist, which I don't think I need to explain why that's disgusting. If Goth was truly feeling guilty, he'd have gone through with the suicide. However, I'm not saying that he should have, because suicide is never necessary. But if he was truly sorry for the harm he'd caused, Palette forgiving him wouldn't have swayed his decision. Rouge also then proceeds to depict Palette saying, "The past is in the past," and proceeds to call his rapist my love, while Goth's dad excitedly welcomes Palette to the family, and Goth doing a dumbass little ooh-ooh face, because that's acceptable to draw a rapist doing after their rape victim forgives them for doing one of the worst things you could possibly do to someone. Next up is Nightmare, the history teacher, Muffet, another teacher, who are both in a relationship, and Killer, a student. Killer has a crush and often fantasizes about being with Nightmare, and is very jealous of Muffet. This part of the story heavily plays into teacher crushes, or TCC, so let's just get started. Killer, a student, haphazardly makes out with Nightmare, a teacher who is also already dating someone. Now, Nightmare understandably lashes out against the person who just sexually assaulted him, which, yes, kissing without consent is apparently sexual assault. I didn't know that either, but hey, we learn something new every day. However, Nightmare lashing out is portrayed as a temper tantrum, and it's trivialized by his brother, Dream, grabbing him and calming him down, and the two brothers proceed to talk about how bad Nightmare feels for defending himself from being sexually assaulted any further. Once again, shouldn't have to say it, but if someone is sexually assaulting you, or even just attacking you, you are 100% in your right to fight back and defend yourself. It's not you having a temper, it's you being brave and strong and taking care of yourself. Not to say that people who don't fight back are weak, because it's understandable to freeze in such a terrifying situation, but all I'm saying is that fighting back should not be shamed. Next up, Killer goes and tries to kill Muffet. When Nightmare finds him, instead of tackling him to the ground, he grabs him, puts his finger on his lip, or where his lip would be, and tells him to be quiet because if Muffet wakes up, Killer will be expelled. Protecting not only the one who sexually assaulted you, but also the one who is trying to murder your girlfriend isn't cute or realistic in any manner. It's disgusting and pathetic that this woman, who, remember, is an adult, would ever try and get away with betraying. Also, the way Nightmare strokes Killer's mouth just gives me some weird, nasty pedophile vibes. Now, these didn't really fit into anywhere else in the sections since they weren't really AU related, but here you go, miscellaneous section. First off, we have child porn of the character Kara, who is canonically a child in Undertale's lore. How wonderful. I don't really give a shit if they might be aged up. Kara is still a minor, and it's still gross. Sadly, I can't navigate Tumblr very well, so there's likely more porn of canon kids made by this adult woman, but I don't have anything to show, sadly. However, I do have the fact that on her Twitter, which she's active on, her bio is a joke about shooting up a school. How amazing and proper for a 28-year-old woman, especially considering she's been under fire lately. You'd expect her to do some damage control and not publicly make school shooting jokes, but you'd also expect someone to not draw tons of pedophilic, incestual, and non-consensual comics too. But hey, here we are. Finally, while it's a bit more on the speculation side, and hell, even a little bit on the nitpicky side, the fact that Ink is often referred to as mom and mommy, despite being a grown-ass cis man, rubs me the wrong way, especially considering Rouge's work feels very yaoi-esque. As a bi guy, it just feels like how straight people will ask lesbian, who's the man in the relationship, or when gay men are asked, who's the top and who's the bottom, or other homophobic comments of that nature. Now, despite these being old issues, Rouge was only called out like a year ago. She actually posted 2 responses too, so let's read them in their entirety, and then I'll be poking holes in their responses because they're pretty shit. I will say I'm only going to look at her Tumblr responses because her Twitter responses are not only kind of difficult for me to read, poor quality from what I could read, but it also just repeats the same information. So let's just go with the Tumblr ones that I can actually read.
All right, back to the good shit on this lovely site, smile. Apparently, I came across a rant about me. I love that stuff. Shit on me all you want. But when you're calling me gross shit and spreading some misinformation new of your ass, that's a big goof right there. I am not gonna directly respond to their posts, cause if I do, I'm some shitfucks who consider themselves my fans will attack that person and I don't want that shit. Let's begin. Oh, before we do, I'm not gonna respond to the allegations concerning other AUs like Little Jammy Hood, VampireVerse, Jammy's Love, and Nye, because those were never supposed to have plots and aren't supposed to go anywhere story-wise. It's not for the sake of representation or reality. They are never intended to normalize anything in them. None of my drawings are supposed to send a message or teach a moral. It's just shitpost shippings. They all just center around shippings and NSFW smut. You know, there is a Sonic fanfiction where in every chapter, Sonic fucks a different Nintendo character. Even the Game Grumps read it in their show and they thought it was dumb and hilarious. Imagine if someone complained about the realism and normalizing problems of that fic. How stupid would that be? In Invader Zim, the voice actors of both Zim and Dib find the ship of their characters funny and even joke around it and tease fans about it in cons. A ship between a bazillion-year-old alien and an 11-year-old kid. I'm not into that ship. In fact, I hate it, but I never ruined people's lives or called them gross things over it. Anyways, for real this time onto what they said about PJ's Daycare, cause I consider that the only thing that is not about shippings nor smut. And also the only thing that has a plot. The premise of PJ's Daycare was largely that an adult Pepper Jam ran a daycare for 1-6-year-olds with the help of young teenagers Goth, Palette, Bluescreen, and Gradient. Goth also tried to commit suicide in this one after believing Palette rejected his advancements. No rape occurred here. I think Palette just didn't respond after Goth confessed romantic feelings for him. Alright, talking about PJ's Daycare now. First of all, Goth and Palette are the only teenagers in this. Bluescreen and Gradient are adults. Second, what are you talking about? Goth never wanted to kill himself cause Palette didn't like him. The one that wanted to jump off a cliff was Gino. The thing about Gino is that he believes he's an adult and that he's better than other kids cause he thinks like one. He wanted to join his brother Error in the afterlife cause he thought that's the only way, but Error wasn't dead. After preventing him from jumping, PJ tells Gino that was wrong and no adult nor child should do that. The kids in PJ's Daycare included a young Error, Ink, Fresh, Lust, Fell Sands, and Swap Sands. Lust's attitude, demeanor, and personality had not changed, despite him being 3 years old, so we have a sexually provocative 3-year-old in this. Fun. No. Lust just is a younger version of his counterpart like everyone else, and like everyone else what he normally does in his is nerfed for the sake of being a kid, so in PJ's Daycare. He just likes throwing kisses. Why did you have to make it weird? Come on. Fresh, I believe was either 3, 4, or 5, and was constantly hitting on flirting with the adult Pepper Jam, and even stalked him outside the daycare. Really? You never saw a kid like an adult. The cute thing about it is that the adult can say, "Oh, that's nice honey," and that's cute cause the adult does not reciprocate the same feeling to that kid. It would be gross and wrong if the adult loved them back, but that's not the case. Bluescreen and Gradient were transformed by Rouge into shipkins of their respective combos, which made them half-brothers, who were then shipped together. Another one who didn't bother to know that the whole universe of PJ's Daycare surrounds around the fact that the creators are the parents of those characters. And since Bluescreen and Gradient are not created by the same people, they are not related here. Look, again, I don't care what you ship as long as you are treating it correctly and not shoving it in other people's faces, incest or otherwise, but as a result of this, a ton of minors in this fandom are now desensitized to these sorts of ships. Look, I never believed in fiction getting into reality. I just have such a thick line between fiction and reality that I never paid any mind to what I was drawing, and normally everybody else should, but apparently not. Like I said before, I ain't sorry just cause you don't feel comfy-wumpy with weird hentai tropes. The only thing I'm sorry about is that I didn't know how to keep minors from seeing my NSFW art. You see, I said this before but I'll repeat it, I was new to Tumblr at the time. And out of most things I saw from it, I thought it was a small place where people draw and write smut stuff without fear. I thought it didn't have any kids in it and that any kids. I thought it was like Pornhub where kids, unfortunately, join it behind their parents' back and the internet can't do anything about it but give them that "Are you over 18? warning. Now I laugh at my past self for thinking that because now I know that Tumblr is full to the brim with kids. The only thing I tried was put an 18+ warning to my blog. I'm sorry. The only time I'm sorry. Now any NSFW stuff of mine is in another place protected and everything. I ain't even gonna link it. Y'all kiddos better stay out of this shit. That's all the direct responding I'll do. And then the person who made the rant goes off about my other shitpost to use, and I don't want to repeat myself. And they go on throwing shade that I normalize pedophilia. All y'all Tumblr people love to just throw around that P word like that, don't ya? What I know is that if you were to find out someone else is an actual goddamn pedo, you're supposed to report them or call the fucking police. But no. According to Tumblrs, you just block them because they hurt your feelings. Oh, so wholesome. So quirky. Catch me coming on a real goddamn minor and then we'll talk. And no, that doesn't mean I'll draw that shit. If you ever find my NSFW site, it's full to the brim with adults. Not everything cute and kawaii is a minor, you creeps. I ain't fazed by any of this, especially after 2016. A lot of poor souls that used to be on Tumblr talk about their younger selves on YouTube and how they just wanted to draw out of proportion, obviously deprived of reality shit just for shits and giggles, and how they got beaten to a pulp for it. That weird, obviously non-realistic shit always finds a way to become something political to these people. Like, are y'all proud of yourselves for almost ruining those people's lives just cause they do things you didn't like? Hell, most of them were kids when they first joined Tumblr. I'm lucky I was an adult when I joined the internet. What a wonderful world we'll live in if we mind our own goddamn business. Like, help around by excluding actual freaks from your and your friend's circle instead of caring about your precious character that doesn't need a lawyer or your so-called protection. I'm not saying get into weird out of the norm things, always stay away with what's uncomfortable for you, of course, but like, if you, unfortunately, see it, scroll past that shit.
Alright, her first argument is pretty bad. Just because little Jammy Hood and NNJ weren't supposed to have stories, doesn't mean you didn't give them a story, specifically about pedophilia, sexual assault, and the trivialization of suicide and suicidal thoughts. I mean, look, I can look at the plotline of Goth and Pallet like each other. Goth rapes Pallet. Pallet gets mad. Goth tries to kill himself. Pallet thanks his rapist. Then they go to the hospital and fall in love, or some bullshit. Seems like a story to me. I mean, not a good one, don't get me wrong, but it is a story. Speaking of her trivialization of suicide, she tries to defend it. Rouge kind of admits she thinks suicidal people are trying to act older or more mature, more whatever, with the line, "The thing about Gino is that he believes he's an adult and that he's better than other kids because he thinks he's one." Like, dude, no, you have a fundamental misunderstanding of what suicide and depression is. Rouge also didn't even talk about her portrayal of Goth's suicide attempt, so I'm guessing she just doesn't want it to be brought back up because she doesn't care about 2016 shit, because that's what a nearly 30-year-old woman should say. Next up, we have her defense of the paper-fresh portrayal in PJ's Daycare. She tries to say that it was just a kid having a crush on a teacher, which, yes, it isn't an uncommon thing. However, stalking the teacher and having other adults encourage the crush to develop into a romantic and possibly sexual relationship isn't. Also, I like how Rouge just dodges the issue with the stalking. It's not surprising or out of character, it's just pathetic. Next, she tries to justify the relationship between Bluescreen and Gradient, who, remember, are both the child of Air Sans, so they're half-brothers. Now, while they have different parents in this AU, why would Rouge only ship these two in one AU, when Paperfresh is present in every AU, and Poth is present in every AU? It makes me think that maybe she ships the incestual ship outside of PJ's Daycare, meaning that When Air is both of their dad, which, I don't know, that's just some food for thought. Look, I never believed in fiction getting into reality. I just have such a thick line between fiction and reality that I never paid any mind to what I was drawing, and normally everyone else should, but apparently not, like I said before. I ain't sorry just cause you don't feel comfy-wumpy with weird hentai tropes. Maybe Rouge isn't 28. Maybe she's secretly been 6 years old, now 12, this entire time, because it's wild to think that a nearly 30-year-old woman would ever write these words, reread them, and say, yes, this makes perfect sense. Allow me to introduce you to the two girls who stabbed their best friend several times and left her in the middle of the woods to bleed out so that Slender Man would take her as an offering so that the other two could go to his mansion. And before you ask, yes, the girl thankfully survived. Also, Yuka Takoka, which I fucking butchered that, I can just tell, who plunged a knife into her boyfriend's stomach. It was later revealed she had an obsession with wanting to be a real-life yandere. Once again, the boyfriend survived, thank God. Daniel Gonzalez, serial killer 4, injurer of 2 others, saying he wanted to be a real-life Freddy Krueger. Theory Jaredin, a 24-year-old pedophile who murdered a 15-year-old girl after she rejected him, saying the Scream trilogy inspired him in his murder. John Venable and Robert Thompson, murdering 2-year-old James Bulger, being inspired by the original Child's Play movie. I guarantee that if pedophilic media was pushed into popular media, we'd hear about a lot more child molestation cases inspired by movies, books, or even songs. Hell, why do you think everyone hated the Netflix movie Cuties? Do you think they just didn't like the color palette, the pacing, or the music? No, it's because it caters to pedos, and it has a part in normalizing that kind of bullshit. Think about the guy who made a review of the movie, saying how we literally got off to the 12-year-olds in there. At the end of the day, Rouge does not deserve the platform she has. She is 28 and has never once truly apologized for the harmful media she creates. She doesn't deserve her Twitter, DeviantArt, or Tumblr presence in the slightest. I believe she should be reported and honestly have her platform taken away. Thank you for watching until the end. You're absolutely amazing. I hope you enjoyed this video and the new overlays and visuals. I worked pretty hard on them. I am sorry about the audio. It's progressively gotten worse because I'm not used to recording for this long and this much, so really sorry about that. It should improve as time goes on. Please subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and if you have any questions, comment them down below. Anyways, I'll see you all in the next video. Later.